Turn to 2 Timothy. 2 Timothy chapter 1. While you're turning there, I rarely, if ever, ask the song leaders to lead a song. I did not ask Jeff to lead that one, but I couldn't have picked a better one for this particular lesson. Sometimes we're just genius, aren't we, Jeff? So we're soldiers of Christ, and we're learning how to be soldiers, and we're ever endeavoring all the more how to be more and more like Christ would have us be. So we go to the scriptures to find our examples. And in scripture, we find an example here in 1 Timothy chapter 1, verse 15. You are aware of the fact that all who are in Asia turned away from me, among whom are Phygelus and Hermogenes. The Lord grant mercy to the house of Onesiphorus, for he often refreshed me and was not ashamed of my chains. But when he was in Rome, he eagerly searched for me and found me. The Lord grant to him to find mercy from the Lord on that day. And you know very well what service he rendered at Ephesus. So we have, and I'm going to mess this name up more times than I want to. On this, I already messed it up. I'm going to call him Oni. Can I just call him Oni instead of Onesiphorus? Here's a guy who's acting behind the scenes. He's doing some valuable service, and it is valuable service, but it's not frontline service. And I think sometimes we make the mistake that unless we're doing frontline service, then our service doesn't count. But that's not true. So Paul is in prison. He's feeling alone, and he says very directly that he's been abandoned by just about everybody. And that is a rather inclusive statement when he says, you're aware of the fact that all who are in Asia turned away from me. And then he lists a couple of names there also. So Onesiphorus comes along and refreshes him, gives him some encouragement as he is entering what most believe is the end of his life. Before I mention who Onesiphorus was, this is probably his last letter. Most scholars, as they look at the life of Paul, think this is the last one he wrote, and from here he went to what we think was an execution in Rome. Now, we don't have biblical record on that, but that's where all the indicators seem to point. So Paul is coming to the end of his life. He's feeling kind of lonely and abandoned, which is just human, and he needs some refreshment. Along comes Onesiphorus, and he's just, well, I hate to say it this way, he's just a disciple. But he was a loyal disciple. He held steady in a bad time. When being associated with Paul became negative and everybody in Asia said, I don't want nothing to do with him, here is Onesiphorus, and he's still hanging in there, and he's actually getting close enough that it could be uncomfortable or disadvantageous for himself to be associated. So he's loyal, he's steady, even in private. And our lesson is going to be, we can be just like him. You don't have to be on the front line. You don't have to be in the spotlight. All you need to be is one of those people that can hang on steady and just show up. Just show up for those in your life. And when you do it, it doesn't matter if anybody else sees it or not. God sees it. And God remembers. And that is part of our fighting the good fight. That is part of being a soldier of Christ. That is part of the consistency. And I think we lose it in the everyday minor little details of life because we don't see it. I think what we look for is we look at some of this stuff, we want to see something big and dramatic and something just way spectacular. We'll have the verse later on. Sometimes it's just a cup of cold water given. That's fighting the good fight. So we have a faithful man in a lonely moment, and that, of course, was Paul, and he was in need, and he was feeling abandoned, and wouldn't anyone. And prisons back then, we can't even imagine. Just think dungeon. Think of some of those movies you've seen where it's like the medieval dark ages, and you got people chained to a wall, and they're just all horrible and bad looking. That's probably a fair representation than trying to think of a modern day prison. And so he's in need. He's hurting. He's wishing someone was there to encourage him through, to support him. probably to bring him a meal or bring him a little drink of water or something or another, because they didn't get 3 square meals a day in prison back in those days. And a lot of times, if you didn't have family to bring you something, you just wasted away. It was a very, very ugly place to be. It's hard for us to get our imagination around it. So staying away would have been way easier for Onesiphorus, because he's getting right in the middle of a place that, I'm trying to think of a nice enough way to word this and yet get the point across. Have you ever visited a nursing home and walked in and thought, they need a new cleaning crew in here? You get the idea? Okay, this would have been 10 times worse, because there was no cleaning crew to come in. They did not care about the ambience of that situation. It would have definitely been easier for us to stay away and go about his business. And we think he's from Ephesus because that little mention there where Paul says that you know how often he rendered service to me at Ephesus. So just as a side point, if Ephesus was his home base, Rome's roughly 800 miles away. Where did he get his plane ticket to get to Rome? It was a multiple week journey to get from Ephesus to Rome. Here's a guy who's not staying in a comfortable place. He's getting out. He diligently sought out Paul. Now this gets to be a little more complicated too, because you and I, when we want to know where something is, how often do you go, hey Siri, tell me how to get to, and Siri starts giving you directions, which I think is great. Had Moses had it, they wouldn't have spent 40 years in the wilderness. No, that's not true. But anyway, so he had to get there to Rome, and now he's at Rome. Rome's a big place, but they didn't have street addresses and everything all labeled out like you and I are used to. It wasn't like going to the malls back when malls were there, and you walk in the front door and it said, you are here, and then there's a map of the mall to tell you where to get. So he didn't walk into Rome and find, oh, I'm here, oh, Paul's over in prison over here. Prison could have been 100 different dungeons throughout the city, who knows? And now he's got to go start asking questions. And he's probably not always going to get a friendly response, but he still diligently sought Paul out. He took his own personal risk, his own discomfort. Who do you think paid for his ticket? Who bought his food along the way? I'm sure maybe he had a benefactor help him out, but he did it. He put himself out there. So it was a ministry of presence is what it boils down to. As he got there, Paul's in prison. Rome is in charge. He can't do anything. Onesiphorus can't go up and go to Caesar and go, hey, let him go. That's my buddy there. Caesar would just soon cut off his head too, right? So all he can do is finally locate him. And when he locates him, ask him, can I get you something? Which is probably a little bread and water. And that's it. That's going to be it. It's going to be a comforting presence. It's going to be like when we go to the hospital. There's nothing we can do to fix anything in a hospital, but we can break the monotony for a minute. We can be there for a moment and help them get through a moment. And now and then it may be, and it does happen, somebody's in such a situation that they can't feed themselves, and they need someone to feed them. And you know, if we wait on the nursing staff to feed them, it's probably going to be a while. And so you help feed them. Or maybe you help them get up out of bed. Or you get the idea. You drop by the nursing home, you just break up that endless series of monotonous, repetitive emptiness there. It's the ministry of presence. And sometimes that's what we need. I was talking to somebody just this week, and they had a friend who had cancer, and they said, well, I hadn't talked to him in a long time because it got really awkward. And I'm saying sometimes you just show up. You just be there. You don't have to do anything. How many of you know how to fix cancer? Me neither. How many of you know how to be a friend? And just sit and maybe be present. And maybe if they want to talk about the issue. Now, this is the tricky part, isn't it? What if they don't want to talk about it? Well, fine, don't talk about it. What if they want to talk about it? Okay, talk about it. You know, let them have it. What if they just want to go get a cup of ice cream or a Coke somewhere and try to pretend for 15 minutes that everything's normal? Then let's get in the car and let's run down to Dairy Queen and get one of those blizzards with the Butterfinger mixed up in it. And let's sit there for half an hour, get sugared up, and pretend that everything's normal. It's not rocket science here. It's just presence. It's just somebody who will treat me like a friend, like I don't have the plague, like, I don't know what to do with you. Just step in and do what you do. That's a ministry of presence. So our faith, when we're really soldiers of Christ, we don't just sit on the couch all the time. Now, I need my couch time now and then. I'm not trying to take your couch away from you, but we don't hang out on the couch all the time, right? We put our shoes on and we get busy doing something. And if you can't get out of the house and do anything more than pick up the phone and send a text, which nowadays is acceptable. Now, in the early days of cell phones, if all you did was send a text, people would be a little bit offended sometimes, because that wasn't the custom yet. Nowadays, a lot of folks would prefer a text, they just like that. Now, if you still want to write a card and send it through the mail, that's a little novel. That's just as good or better. But a text message is fine. And then you're going to put at the end of that text message, if you need to talk, give me a call. I'm free right now. And if they don't call you back, that's their business. But you made the contact. And that's all it took. So if you can't get off the couch and get out and do much physically, and that happens as we get older, you got a phone? Does that thing work both ways? Then quit being a crybaby about it and get about the business of being present via the phone, whether it's actually the vocal conversation or text messages. So sometimes the bravest thing you can do is just refuse to leave. I'm going to stand by your side whether you like it or not. And I don't mean that it literally has to be exactly by your side. So I heard a story. Of course, I listen to a lot of podcasts. And the friend had a friend whose father died. And one of them has already lost his father and understood what it's like. And he also understood that a lot of little things we say around the day of one's death, they're very kind. They're well-meaning, but you are so overwhelmed at the time that you really, what do you remember? So he said, I took a different tact. He said, for 30 days, I told my friend, I'm going to call you every morning at 9 o'clock. If you want to answer, you answer. If you don't want to answer, you don't answer. I understand. But I want you to know that for every morning, for 30 days, I'm going to call you at 9 o'clock. And he said after about 2.5 weeks, the friend picked up the phone, was ready to talk. And they had small little conversations. Nothing deep, nothing profound, just that little moment of connection. When we say, I refuse to leave you alone, sometimes it's nothing more than letting your presence be known. I'm here. I'm not going to force myself on you. I'm not going to stick my nose in your business without your invitation. But I'm here. Give me a call. Answer the phone when I call. Send a text back. It can be that simple. And that can be refreshing. And what are we looking for? Refreshment. So they blend together, our refreshment and our courage. Onesiphorus was not a one-hit wonder in that he went in one day, did something great and fabulous, and he said, ooh, look at me. And then he stepped out of the picture. He didn't see any dramatic improvement. It wasn't coming. And again, if our historians are right, Paul went from here to being beheaded. This was the end of Paul. And as you read the letter of 2 Timothy, there's a whole lot of things in there that look like Paul knew that was the end. I can see why scholars say that was Paul's last letter, and it makes good sense. So hope was really slim that anything was going to improve here, but Paul still needed somebody. Look, if the doctor says it's terminal, there's nothing we can do. You got 6 weeks to live. Do you want to lay there in the bed by yourself, alone and isolated and abandoned for that last 6 weeks? The old kind of ideal way of passing away is you get to be in your bed at home, surrounded by your family and loved ones as you make your final departure. And that's more ideal, right? And family's got to have the courage just to be present. That's it. Just to be present and sit through an uncomfortable time themselves. Paul needed somebody, and when somebody in our life needs someone, this is one of our ways that we step up and we serve. And it requires a little bit of courage because it is awkward for us. We have made death and sickness and dying such a separate part of our life. I don't know that it's wise, but if they get too old, we stick them in a nursing home, and I forget the percentages, but a large percentage of people in nursing home have no one that ever visits them. It's easier to stay away than to go see a loved one slowly dwindling away to nothing and to deal with the depression that's there. So it takes courage. But when it's death and there's no recovery, it's terminal, it takes courage to sit there and be honest about it too. Because as we're sitting there with the terminal person, we're also aware of our own mortality, and we don't like that. It's kind of funny, because I'm talking all the time. I've got the app on my phone called We Quote, We Croak, and every 5 times a day it says you're going to die. And I'll talk about death. And sometimes, would you believe it, some of y'all whine and go, I don't like to hear about that. And in my mind, I'm trying to be polite, but I'm thinking, you better like to hear about it, because it's appointed unto man wants to die. You're going to die. You're going to fall over stone cold dead one moment. We're going to go, I think he's dead. Somebody call 911. And they're going to get out there and go, he's dead. And you're going, well, I didn't expect that. Why? Because we've separated all the ugly parts way over here in the side somewhere. And we stick them in the background so we don't have to deal with them. And it takes courage to just say, no, I'm not playing that game. I'm going where the people hurt are. And I'm going to be present. And I know I can't fix a thing. And I can't. But I'm going to be there, and I'm going to take a little bit of the edge off. I had a friend to go see an old friend in a nursing home. And the friend was getting close to the end, but he loved Oreo cookies. And he'd sneak him in Oreo cookies, because if the nurse caught him, she'd chew him out because he didn't need that junk food. My friend would say, why? What are we doing here? I'm just trying to make him happy till he passes on. It was inevitable. So Onesiphorus showed up. He showed up. That's what we do. That's a big part of our soldiering. That's a lot of fighting the good fight. And our success is usually quiet. Most people aren't going to know anything about it. So we're not going to get any applause. Yes, we'll get a thank you or two from the people we serve. And that's fine. But the rest of the world doesn't care. They're busy going, doing whatever they're doing. It's going to cost us a little bit of something. Onesiphorus gave part of his life to Paul. And think about that. He really gave part of his life. It took weeks to get from Ephesus to Rome. I don't know how long he stayed in Rome, how long the legal process took for Paul before he was beheaded. But he was there for weeks and weeks giving Paul part of his life. And before that, he did that also in Ephesus. So that loyalty is going to be selfless. It's going to be sacrificing. It's going to endure. And you ladies get this better than us men get it. Recent statistic, and I can't recall the numbers, but if a woman has a mate and his health fails and he becomes terminal, the chances of her leaving him are only like 2%. Most women, you have that nurturing, mothering thing. You're not going to leave. It wasn't so pretty with the men. If a man had a mate that became physically ill and it was chronic or terminal, it was more like 24% of men would divorce their mate instead of stay and take care of her. I'm like, you got to have a selfless, sacrificing mentality. You really got to understand that. When you said in the case of marriage, better or worse, sickness and health, till death do we part, I'm in it. I didn't just say those words because that's what the preacher said. I meant it. That's the kind of loyalty we're talking about. And again, being associated with Paul wasn't a good thing. Paul was kind of considered notorious for his time. And so you get to respond, associated with that too much, you're going to get in trouble. So in Proverbs 17:17, it said, a friend loves at all times. And I think that's what shaped it. Onesiphorus loved Paul. He really, really cared for Paul. It wasn't a church act. It wasn't a little routine. There wasn't anything to gain financially. It was just simple love. And when you have simple love, it'll crawl across broken glass to get the job done right. And so I think that loyalty really did flow from love. And that, of course, is what Christ taught us there in John 13. I'll remind you quickly, love is a verb. Love got to do something. If you tell me you love me, I appreciate that. That's nice enough. But what's that going to do? Say it. I'm not against saying it. But if it's not followed through with some action, then what's it mean? It's a verb. It's an action. It's something we do. So in this verse, he helped Paul through the end days, not the glamorous days, not the glory days, not the taking missionary journeys all over the world days, the ugly, nasty setting in a dark, nasty prison days. That's where he was. And so Paul gives him something back. And it's better than anything else. It's in verse 18. Lord, grant to him to find mercy from the Lord on that day. And you know how very well what service he rendered at Ephesus. Onesiphorus was not a flawless saint. He needed mercy too. Yeah, he's a great example. I think he's a very good example. But God's mercy, that's what we need. And that's what Paul prayed for Onesiphorus, was that mercy. So what happened in prison didn't stay in the prison, did it? It kind of ripples out. And so we have an ordinary act of faith, and it causes changes. What all exactly they were, I don't know. We'll never know, but it was good. And I say it rippled out. Let me see if I can grab it right here. Verse 16. The Lord grant mercy to the house of Onesiphorus. Oh, he wasn't the only one receiving blessing, was he? It was his household that Paul prayed for. How many of us would appreciate to have Paul's prayer, not just for us personally, but for our whole household? So there's faith in how it ripples out into the rest of life and it goes beyond. And sometimes it goes places you'll never ever know. Now this is a very rare exception when we look at Onesiphorus, but that was 2,000 years ago. Where's his faith still rippling today? There wasn't even a Pine Bluff when he was doing what he did 2,000 years ago, was there? There was no way he could ever imagine that one day his faithful example would still be rippling through the United States of America. But it is. And sometimes our good service ripples forward beyond what we can understand. Oh, we can see the very local thing, but how did you get to be a Christian? Well, I had a friend how'd your friend get to be a Christian? Well, somebody taught, well, how did that person get to be a Christian? For 2,000 years, there's been a chain of gospel truth that's been rippling forward one generation after another. And so many of those people are absolutely faceless and nameless, and we will never know who they were. But they did not break the chain. And because they did not break the chain, their faith is still rippling forward. And as long as we are part of that chain moving forward, our faith will still ripple forward. Not in profound ways, I get it, but we're part of it. And we're the link of our generation. So Onesiphorus was not a flawless saint. He was a regular, ordinary human. He's doing something pretty astounding here in the only text we have on him. But he also needs mercy. And we also need mercy as we move forward. So we have a legacy of simplicity, just the showing up. You know that Onesiphorus never speaks in Scripture. We don't have one word recorded of anything he ever said. If you look at verse 15 through 18, that's it. Now, if you go all the way over to chapter 4, same book, and you come down to his closing comments, he mentions him one more time in verse 19. And it just refers to the household of Onesiphorus, and that's it. That's the only mentions we've got of him. But man, does he ever speak. His example's still there. And we can look at it. Now, this is one of the problems of our daily Bible reading. We haven't got there yet, obviously, since we're doing a Genesis through. But as we do this in our daily Bible reading, and you look at it, and you read through it, and you go, oh, that's kind of neat. That's glad I don't have to say that name. And you move on. But if you can stop and camp out on a passage and really look at it, that's one of the advantages of getting to be a preacher. Of course, you got to come up with 104 sermons a year, not counting another 100 Bible classes. And so you do tend to look at things a little closer and a little deeper. As you start looking at them deeper, you start seeing a whole lot more. And then you start seeing instruction there about how can I be a good soldier in my time when I'm not even going to be as noteworthy as Onesiphorus was. And yet God saw fit to record that example so we'd have something to follow. So he's remembered for just showing up and staying close in an ugly time. And that's going to be one of our biggest challenges. Let me say that again. That's going to be one of our biggest challenges, is showing up and being present for family, our brotherhood, in an ugly time. Because it's in those ugly times it's going to be so much easier just to get away and leave it alone. Yet Onesiphorus kept showing up. And that's how most of us are going to be. We're going to be that kind of person. Just respond to the need. Now here's Matthew 10:42. I told you way earlier we'd mentioned that if you give a cup of cold water, that's the passage, Matthew 10:42. So again, we're not talking about big, profound, fantastic feats of whatever. We're talking about refreshing somebody. And sometimes that refreshing, it's just presence. It's just the thoughtfulness that you were willing to take 30 minutes, an hour out of your day and just be present. I'd like to tell you stories, but I'm really not free to tell all the stories I know, but it happened just very recently, and it was not planned. It was an accident. Sharon and I spent, I'd say, 45 minutes with somebody, and they were so appreciative because they're going through a hard time. And they were just great that somebody, and there was, like I say, there was no profound, there was no sermon, there were no Bible lessons, there were no deep 15-minute prayers. There was just being presence for less than an hour and treating them like they were human and everything's okay. Sometimes that's all it takes. Just respond to a need in a simple, caring, compassionate way. And when you do that, nobody else will know. But God pays attention. And that's the encouraging part, right? That's your laying up treasures in heaven. I'm like, well, that doesn't sound very hard. No, it's not really hard. Most of it isn't hard. So our final slide here. He's not a hero. He's just faithful. And most of us just going to live average lives. And when the ones that knew us pass, we'll be forgotten. And that's great. And we're not going to change the world in any way. We're probably not going to be thought of twice 10, 15 years after we're dead, unless somebody's looking at the family tree chart. And a lot of times as we're struggling through life, that couch is going to look a whole lot safer. And I don't mean the couch literally. It could be. Where's that place you would just rather hang out where you have the least amount of headaches? That's your couch. Is it the golf course? Is it just snuggle up on the couch literally with your favorite book and a cup of hot chocolate in the winter? That sounds kind of nice, doesn't it? Right? Is it driving down the road going across country, but there's nobody there to bother you? Just that place where you like to have your little hideout. Yeah, that's going to look a whole lot better a whole lot of times. But we can just show up. We can. We can just show up. And we can refresh others a little bit. Sometimes we'll never understand it, but sometimes we just stay close. And it's refreshing. And we like that. We like to be on the receiving end of that especially. So God's still writing stories like Onesiphorus. I didn't butcher the name too bad. You can tease me about it later. I looked up how to pronounce it. It was supposed to be emphasis on knee. Onesiphorus. I'm Arkansas. God's still writing stories like his. through people like us. And when we let him write stories like his through us, here's what I want to tell you. You are fighting the good fight. You are doing the soldiering that average soldiers like us do. We need a whole lot more of them. Let me make one more point and I'll quit. What if Pine Bluff was nothing but a bunch of quiet, behind the scenes Onesiphorus? Yeah, that was hard to get out. It'd be paradise on earth, wouldn't it? That starts with you and me choosing to be like Onesiphorus. If you're on that path, you know what to say. Stay the path. If not, let us help you change while together.